It is kind of a weird thing for me to have a whole day seminar on safety, and you probably hear me every now and then talk about and perhaps substitute the word quality for safety, because I have about 40 years of experience in the quality side of things. So why should I be talking to you about safety? You have to go back to, I would say 1996, to an event that occurred in my life I'm going to share with you to give you a perspective on why I'm talking today, and hopefully put an exclamation mark on the importance of this subject. In 1996, I was running a very high technology aluminum wheel plant in the United States. It was the first introduction of this technology into the wheel business globally. And I had just been interviewed by Fortune magazine, who came to Columbus, Indiana, to do a piece about Japanese manufacturing practices and how Americans were revolutionizing the technology that had come over from Japan so that they were actually teaching the Japanese. And so if you look it up, December 1996, I'm there in Fortune magazine, Columbus, Indiana is in there and all that. The very next day, after this peak experience of being recognized as kind of an important production guy, running a very fine plant that did all these nice metrics and whatnot, we had, I was sitting in my office literally reviewing our metrics to talk to corporate about how good we were doing, and I had someone rush into the office and tell me that Scott, one of my operators, had gotten hurt. And so I run out to the shop floor, and he had been wearing gloves, but you know, we're a foundry, we pour molten metal, and he had failed to follow instructions and not properly preheated a piece of a ladle that was supposed to be inserted into the furnace. Long story short, metal poured out of that and over his hand. Of course, his glove was largely burned away. His skin and his wedding ring was kind of encased in this metal that had solidified around his hand. Just a terrible circumstance, and he was quite stricken. Tried to put a happy face on it, but you could tell he was in extreme pain. Of course, we called 911 and all that. So a little bit later that afternoon, I had this sense that I should visit him in the hospital, trying to be, you know, a good human being about it. And I'm in the waiting room, and a lady comes up, and she talks to one of the other people that's in the lobby there in the waiting room area, and then she comes right up to me, and she grabs me by the shirt like this. I discovered that she's Scott's sister, and she asked me how I could let this happen to her brother. It wasn't my fault. That's what I thought. He had failed to follow instructions. That was not what I needed to tell his sister at that time. See, I discovered that with all the awards and feeling of pride about running a fancy high-tech manufacturing plant and being in Fortune magazine kind of paled in importance to the significance of the human lives that are entrusted to us. The people that actually make the money in our factories are the people that are working on the shop floor. And I got a lot of accolades for running a nice plant, but I was about zero height with respect to that woman whose brother got injured in my factory. And you know, when I started to think about her comments that it was me that let him get injured, my excuses about him failing to follow procedures began to pale. because it was me that decided that Scott would be doing that job that day. It was me that gave Scott the training. It was me that put an emphasis on production and not safety that caused him to hurry and fail to preheat that ceramic tube that ended up being the conduit for aluminum that got on his hand. It was me that gave him the time and the constraints and the culture and the priorities that led to that incident. It was not an accident. It was an event that occurred for reasons that I personally had something to do with. That's why I think safety is the only thing more important than quality. Human lives are more important than being written up in Fortune magazine or having an award-winning reject rate in my factory, in my corporation. It's a little bit of a serious way to begin a topic, but safety is really important. And I have not only a personal relationship with it, but I also find that my experience in quality dovetails nicely with what we need to be doing with respect to safety. I don't consider myself an OSHA expert. I'm not going to tell you how far the guarding has to be from a grinding wheel. But I am going to talk to you about what kinds of organizations have good performance, both quality and safety. I'm going to talk to you about what it takes to engage employees so that they make the right decisions on the shop floor when you're not watching, because that's where it's at. So today we have an agenda which eventually I'll get to. There we go. There are a very large number of buttons here and no work instructions. So, okay. So today's program, and you have a copy of it. If I had unlimited funds, you would have gotten large copies of all the slides. You have relatively small copies, but you've got some space to write. And my understanding from Bruce is that he'll figure out a way to make this available in some easily read format. But our topics today, it looks like we're covering a lot of different things, so let me kind of give you a broad understanding of how we're going to progress through our day. The first part of the program, until the break this morning, is going to be focused on the context, what the numbers say about where this industry, the trailer industry, RV and towable trailer industry is. And we're going to take just a few moments to talk about how to connect that information to your local situation. And we'll kind of give you an appreciation of the breakdown that you can get with data so that you can make some inferences about where you are in your organization. So that'll take us to the first break. In the second step, we're going to be talking about the organizational requirements for safety, big picture. And we're going to specifically take a few moments to talk about something that, if you've followed the news, know what's going on in Indiana, you probably heard of something called an opioid crisis or substance abuse crisis. And we're going to take a few steps to talk about that, because that cannot be ignored as a factor of safety in our organizations. Nowhere in the United States, but Indiana does not rank last in this problem. It's actually 14th out of 50 states, and that means it's a fairly significant issue, and much of that is in northern Indiana, not southern Indiana. So that'll take us through to lunch. Then after lunch, we'll take a bit of time to try to help us to learn from the safety incidents that are occurring right now. How do we do root cause analysis? How do we do incident investigation so that we maximally learn from those incidents and enable us to apply that so that we can take action not only on the long term but on the short term basis. And then we'll end up in the afternoon talking about things that people believe about safety but aren't actually true, and if we do believe them, will prevent us from having success in safety improvement. So we'll talk about some myths, and then wrap up by hitting the leadership aspect again. The title of this program, of course, is A Leadership Perspective on Safety in the Workshop or Workplace, and we need to make sure to touch on that again. As a vice president, I've been in that role for about 10 years now, so I have to care about money, and I have to care about the overall operations of the organization, not just the nice little quality things, or I also have responsibility for environmental health and safety. And so I wish I could take those things separately and not connect them to the business plan and marketing strategy and all that stuff, but I can't. It's all got to be a one whole piece. And so we'll share a little bit about how those connect and link them with quality performance at the end.